Hello friends, I am going to go through this quiz practice, which is going to be really similar to the actual quiz, but I just want to be able to help you guys if you're stuck on anything because you're not going to have a lot of time to ask questions before you have your quiz. So this stuff in the first couple things is off your green chart. So make sure that you're starting to learn that. So you would go to your green chart, you would look at this particular question, you would say, okay, this one is in vertex form. So start thinking through, how do I find these pieces of information based on what it says on my green chart? So the vertex in vertex form is an eyeball activity. You need to look at this H value and this K value. And if you look at your chart notes, it will tell you to use the opposite of H. Well, the H is a -3 right here because H is located inside the parentheses. So the opposite of that would be 3. And then my K value is going to be used as is, so -2. So, all right. Now I know that my vertex is at 1, 2, 3, down 2. Really hard to see. There we go. Something that follows real quickly from that is my axis of symmetry. If you look, maybe I'll jot this on here. This is what you would see from your green chart for your vertex. You would see that you need the opposite of H, even though that looks like a B. So you would need the opposite of H and then your K value. Negative here is meaning opposite, not negative necessarily. Then your axis of symmetry is going to be x equals the x coordinate of the vertex, which is going to be that value. So in this case, my x coordinate for the vertex is a 3. So when I go to write my axis of symmetry equation, I write it as x equals 3. So again, no math. And then I'm going to draw that in because that's going to be part of what you have on your graph. It's one of the graph features. Okay, go right down the list. On my chart, to find the y-intercept, what I'm supposed to do there, it says apparently that I'm supposed to plug in x equals 0. So let's do the math for that. I'm taking my equation, this one right here, and I'm plugging in 0 for x, and then that would turn into -3 squared, which is 9 minus 2, so I get 7. So my y-intercept is at 0, 7. So counting up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, keeping in mind that this is 3 to the left. So if I go 3 to the right, I'm going to get another key point. Alrighty, now simply for lack of space, I'm going to have to erase the work that I did here. And then, oh, that worked well. Then I'm going to go ahead and show my work for this last one, finding the zeros. So again, refer back to your chart. And your chart is going to tell you that to find the zeros, you set the equation equal to 0. And then you're going to solve by square roots. So to get the square alone, I add a 2 to both sides. To get rid of a square root sign, to get rid of a square, I need to use the square root, introducing both plus or minus because I don't know which one it was. So I need to look at both options. On this side, that just cancels out. And so here, this estimates, according to my calculator, to be about 1.41. And this side, the square and the square root cancel one another out. So at this point, I have two options. I have positive and negative 1.41 equaling x minus 3. But I have to go in here and add 3 to get rid of it. So x is going to either equal 1.41 plus that 3, or the second option is negative 1.41 plus that 3. So if I go ahead and do that addition in the first one, I'll get 4.41 as one of my zeros, which is a place that it'll cross the x. And then the other one, I'm getting 1.59. Okay. So my zeros are going to be at x equals 4.41 or 1.59. I go over here, here's 1. I do my best to do 5.9. Then I go 3, 4.41. And it's good that they're kind of symmetrical because that's what should happen. So then I can connect those 5 key points. Keep in mind my 5 key points were my vertex, which I found by just looking at H and K. My y-intercept, which I found by plugging in 0 and its partner. And then my x-intercepts, which I found over here using the square root process. Then I can draw these in, and then that is going to be my parabola. So there's only 2 questions like this on the real test too, because that's what this is. This is a practice quiz. It's the same length. It's the same difficulty. It's the same format. Everything about it is the same, except potentially the actual numbers you're working with. So you really want to understand what you're doing, not just copy what I'm doing, because that will not come in very handy when you go to do it on your own. So now I'm still working with the green chart, except now I have this problem here. This one's going to be in standard form. And if it's in standard form, then I need to use the standard form part of my chart. And one of the key features there is understanding what the A, B, and C values are. Keeping in mind that the A value is going to be in front of the x squared, then the B, and then the C. So my A is simply a 1, since there's nothing there. B is a 4, and C is a 3. None of them are negative, so all of my values are positive. Okay, so when I look at my chart, my vertex x coordinate is supposed to be the opposite of B over 2 times A. So I'm just putting in my B and A value for that. That gives me -4 over 2, which reduces to -2. So I already have the information that I need for my axis of symmetry equation, even without knowing the y value, which, keep in mind, and again, looking at my chart, I confirmed that what I'm going to do for my y value is I'm going to go back to my equation up here, and where there was an x, I'm going to plug in my x coordinates. So I just got -2 for that. So that's going to give me 4 minus 8, which is -4 plus 3, so -1. But I could have done my axis of symmetry equation even before that, because I know that if I'm at -2, -1, my axis of symmetry has to go through it, which will only happen, like always, for this, if it equals the x coordinate of my vertex. So that's just going to be an eyeball activity every single time. It has to come vertically, so it's x equals, right down through the middle of this value. All right, so that is 2 of the 4 things they're asking me for. I'm going to erase this to give me space to work again. Then I'm going to start tackling the y-intercept. That's super easy, because if I look on my chart, it tells me that the y-intercept is nothing more than 0c. Since this was my c value, that's going to be at 0,3. And the reason is that I have to do the same thing. I plug in x equals 0 to this equation that I'm working with. But the equation that I'm working with, if I plugged in a 0, I'd have 0 squared plus 4 times 0 plus 3. Everything would be gone except for that 3, and that's why that becomes my y-intercept. So at 0, it's going to cross at 1, 2, 3. Then since that's 2 to the right of my symmetry line, I go 2 to the left and put its buddy there. And now I have 2 of the 5 points that I need in order to graph this really well. So again, I need space to work. So the idea with the video is that you can go back and just watch the parts you need. So then if you need that work, you can certainly go back to it. What I'm going to tackle right now are the zeros. The zeros, according to my green chart, I have to find by quadratic formula, factoring, or something like that. And I'm going to factor this one because it's factorable. And actually, we've only done problems that are factorable, so I would expect that you would only do them as well, because I wouldn't put a quadratic formula problem on your quiz after not going over that with you at all. So in order to make 3, I'll need a 3 times 1. In order for those to add up to a positive 4, they'll both need to be positive. But again, I keep putting that 0 factor chart down everywhere we go. So I just found out my factors are x plus 1 and x plus 3. So then the question becomes, what would make each one 0? Here, x would have to be -1. Here, it would have to be -3. So my zeros are -3 and -1. So then at -1 and -1, 2, 3, so I'm glad those look like partners. Those are the 2 places that it crosses the x-axis, because zero solutions, x-intercepts are all the same thing. Connect my 5 key points, and I'm good. So if you're looking at this on a test, there's an awful lot of points, because you've got your vertex, your zeros, your y-intercept, your axis of symmetry. Then you have to graph them properly, have your axis graphed, have your parabola going the right way and doing the right thing. So just take your time as you walk through that and use your green chart all the way through there. Okay, so keeping in mind that when you get to a word problem, it has to be stuff we learned about. And really, we just learned about max and mins, you know, the vertex. So Math Inc. reports the profit in millions are modeled by the following equation. All right, well, that's standard form. So I'm going to go to standard form of the part of my chart, in which X represents the number of calculators sold. Okay, so that's something I probably just want to keep in mind. So X is going to be the number of calculators sold. P is going to be the profit. So that's apparently what that's talking about. All right, so it says, show work to find the number of calculators. Since X is the number of calculators, they must sell to maximize the profit. Looking at this, my A value is a -1, if you can see that right here in front of the X squared. So it's going to be a parabola opening down, and so we're going to be looking for a vertex that's at the top, and therefore it's going to be a maximum. But they told us that X is the number of calculators, so when it's looking for the number of calculators, that's going to be the X component of that max profit. And since I'm in standard form, that's going to be the opposite of B over 2A. So looking at my values up here, that would be the opposite of 24, so -24 over 2 times A, which is -1. That turns into 24 over 2, which turns into 12. So apparently 12 calculators is where you maximize the profit. That seems weird, but okay. In part 3B, it says, show how to find the max profit. Well, if this told me how many calculators I need, that's the X. Now they're asking me what's the highest Y value. So to get the Y, once you know the X, if you refer to your green chart, it's going to tell you, or if you just think about what you know, when you need the X and you know, when you know the X and need the Y, you just plug it in. So I'm going back to this equation and I'm going to plug in my X. So the profit at 12 calculators, which was apparently my max profit number, is going to be -12 squared plus 24 times 12 minus 8. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that on my calculator. So -12 squared and so on. And I get 136. And keep in mind, that's $136 million. Well, it seems like an awful lot for 12 calculators, but whatevs. It is correct. Okay, so let's take a look at the next one. And again, if you're like staring at this and your brain is starting to numb, there's not like a rule that you have to watch the whole video at once. Watch a little part of it until you know what you're doing and then come back to it when you can be fresh again. All right, so the degree is nothing more than this highest power, so that would be 5. Think about what that tells you. Tells me that I expect to have 5 zeros, which would turn into 4 turns because there's always one less turn than zeros. And then 5 is also an odd number, obviously, so that's telling me something about the ends. I'm going to have opposite ends. One's going to go up, one's going to go down. How do I know? By looking at this number. My A value is negative. With a negative A, that tells me the right end is going to go down. And because these are opposites, since it was an odd degree, I know that the left end has to do the opposite thing, so it's going to go up. Wow. Thank you, Notability. Okay. So it's telling me to find some zeros and factors. Well, I have to do factors because they haven't told me any of the zeros. So if you go back to the factoring review that we did, or hopefully did, the first thing you always do is the GCF, the gotta check first, as I call it. And if you're looking at this equation, I always take out the negative because I don't like dealing with it. 3 goes into everything, and x to the third goes into everything. So if I divide each of these pieces by a -3x cubed, I'd end up with an x to the second plus, because the negatives would cancel, 3x, and then minus 4. So one of my factors is -3x cubed. These I now need to factor to figure those out because I only so far know that this is one of my factors. So going back to factor this one, I need 4 in a way that can subtract to be 3. So that means this is my option. 4 times 1, I need it to be a positive 3. So I'll need a positive 4 minus 1. So if those are my factors, x minus 1 and x plus 4, then I kind of start looking and thinking, okay, what does that mean my zeros will be? Well, the 0 that goes with a negative 3x cubed has to be 0. That's the only way that that will turn into 0 when I plug it in. Here I would need to plug in a 1 so that 1 minus 1 was 0. Here I'd have to plug in a negative 4 so that negative 4 plus 4 would equal 0. Keep in mind that multiplicity is referring to how many times that factor is repeated. This doesn't really have multiplicity because there's no power up here in this little power spot. And so then this one doesn't have multiplicity either. When you just have like no multiplicity, it's not repeated, it's just going to cross in that spot. But this one has a power or multiplicity of 3, which I'm going to look up on my green information, it's probably on the back, is odd. And when you have an odd multiplicity greater than 1, that's when it's going to snake across the graph at that spot. So all this information that I know is going to be super helpful now because now I can graph this thing really accurately. So I'm going to look over here for my zeros. So I'm going to have one at 0, 1, and then negative 1, 2, 3, 4. So mark those, make it obvious to me that you know what you're doing. I know from up here that my right end over here is going to go down and that my left end is going to be going up. Then I go through here and I say, okay, what's going to happen at this 0 of negative 4? I'm just going to cross over. Okay, I'll just cross over. What's going to happen at my next 0, which is 0? I'm going to snake across. Okay, so when I come up here, I do my best to kind of do a little wiggle. And then what happens at this last 0 of 1? Well, I'm just going to cross. All right, so I'm going to curve up and come back down. So that's my best drawing. I don't really know how far down this goes or exactly what's happening in this area, but I can do a good job of showing that I know it crosses here at negative 4, here at 0, here at 1. Here it's going to cross through, here it's going to snake through, here at 1 it just goes straight through. So those are all the things you would want to do for a problem like that. Okay, and this can be time consuming if you don't know what you're doing, so you definitely are going to need to kind of come into it prepared. Write the equation in factor form so I don't have to multiply it out. Okay, so that's good news. With the given zeros. All right, so the given zeros, again, what I'm going to do is kind of for my own, like, being able to figure it out, I'm going to think about my zeros and my factors. This is a negative 3 with a multiplicity of 5. This is a 2 and then a 3 with a multiplicity of 2. So if you have a factor of negative 3, that becomes x plus 3 repeated 5 times because of the multiplicity. A factor of 2 becomes x minus 2. There was no multiplicity mentioned. And a factor of 3 becomes x minus 3, multiplicity of 2. So my function is going to be f of x times x plus 3 to the 5th times x minus 2 times x minus 3 to the 2nd. So I'm just listing it in factor form. I leave it just like that. Okay, this graph implies that I'm supposed to graph it. So I know that I have a 0 at negative 3 because they told me, at 1, 2 because they told me, and at 3 because they told me. Now, here's where I have to find out the degree. This x is to the 5th. I'm ignoring the numbers. This x is to the 1st, and this last x is to the 2nd. So I add up the powers, and that means I have a total of x to the 8th power. That, my friends, is my degree. It's even, so they'll have the same ends. There's not a negative out in front, so that means that it's going to be a positive. So my right is going to go up, My left is going to go down because I have a degree of 8. I'm sorry, because I have a degree of 8, they're going to do the same thing. So once I know the right is going up because this is positive, the left is going to go up as well. So this end's going to go up. This end's going to go up as well. I know that here at -3, because it's an odd power greater than 1, it's going to snake across. I know that here that doesn't have any multiplicity, so it's just going to come through and cross through their plane. And then lastly, I know here with a multiplicity that's even, it's just going to bounce at the 3 and go back up. So that my graph represents everything that I knew should happen. Okay. I'm going to actually skip to 8 because it's the same concept. No, I'm not. I lied. Because this is going to shift gears into using division to find that. Now, in this case, I have to use long division because I'm dividing by something that doesn't have just a plain x. It's got that 4 in front of it. So I'm probably going to struggle for space, but I'll do my best. So 4x plus 3 is going to get divided into this top part. And if I'm missing any powers of x, I have 3, 2, 1, none. Okay, I'm not missing any, but if I was missing some on my test, I'd have to leave zeros in that spot. So for example, like if there wasn't an x squared term, I'd have to have a term, I'd put a 0 right here. Okay, so I'm going to look at this 4 and this first term, and I'm going to think about what I have to multiply that by. Or if you would rather, you can think, what is 12x to the 5th dividing out of 4x? This part becomes a 3. This x cancels 1, and I get 3x to the 4th. So no, that's wrong because I copied my own work wrong. Sorry about that. I can't even read my own handwriting. What I meant to say is I have 12x to the 3rd divided out by 4x. This will turn into a 3. This will turn into a 2. So my first term is going to be 3x squared up there. And then if it helps you to keep track of things, you can write that here next to what you're going to multiply it by, because you got to take that top and multiply it by that. So now I'm going to distribute, which will give me a 12x to the 3rd from here, and then a 9x squared. At this point, I'm subtracting. So 12x cubed minus 12x cubed is gone, which was the idea. And then be a little careful here because you're going to be doing negative 11x squared minus 9. And so these combine to give you negative 20x squared. Bring down the 9x. Then you start over. Now you look and you say, okay, what do I have to do to 4x to make it equal negative 20x squared? Or you can think about dividing this by 4x. This becomes a negative 5. This would cancel down to a plain x. Then I need to go over here and take that negative 5x, and you bring in the negative with you, times this 4x plus 3 from the side. Distributing that, I get negative 20x squared, and then be careful, that becomes a minus 15x. But now I have to come through and subtract. Negative 20x squared minus a negative turns to adding and is gone. 9x minus negative 15 turns to adding as well and becomes a 24x. Bring down the 18. Now I'm on round 3. So if I have 24x and I'm dividing out this 4x again, that's going to turn into a 6 and the x's are gone. So I'm going to get a straight up 6. So this is going to be my answer because I'm at the end of my division line. Anything beyond that will be remainder. So I'm going to take that 6 and multiply it by this side part, 4x minus 3. Actually, it's a plus, sorry. That will turn into 24x. That turns into 18. So in this case, there actually isn't going to be a remainder because when I do 24 minus 24, it's gone. 18 minus 18, it's gone. So I have 0 as my remainder, which means I don't have a remainder, which means when I divide these two things, it goes in evenly and I get this as my final answer, no remainder. All right, I'm going to erase some of this stuff so that you can actually see what I'm doing here. That was a lot of work. This one's going to be very little work because in this next example, I'm going to be doing synthetic division since I'm dividing by something where the x is plain. It's not squared, there's not a 3x or a 2x. It's just plain old x plus or minus a number. The catch is, when you go to do the synthetic division, you think of this as a factor, but what has to go in here is the 0. So since they gave me a factor I'm going to use, or potentially a factor, I don't know yet if there's a remainder, I actually have to put a 2 in here. So what you're dividing by and what you put into that corner box are going to be opposites in terms of plus or minus. Now be careful and look for those missing powers of x. There's a 1x cubed, a minus 4x squared, a positive 2x, and a 5. So I actually don't have any missing parts, so that's awesome. Then I'm going to do my work, which is just to drop that number. Once it's below the bar, it gets multiplied by this 2. Then I look at these numbers and say, okay, a negative 4 plus 2 will be negative 2. Multiply by the bottom number again, I get negative 4. So looking at this, positive 2 minus 4 is going to be negative 2 again. So then these become a negative 4, and these generate a remainder of 1. Sorry, I'm just checking my work. Okay, so this is going to be my remainder. And when you perform synthetic division, you're going from whatever power you had to 1 power less. So I end up with 1x squared, and then from here, minus 2x, and then from here, minus 2, and then I add any remainder I got over what I divided by. So my answer looks like this whole thing, where this was the answer over here. Stop moving around, little box. This was the answer over here. This was the remainder, which is this last guy. And then this is what I divided by. So you found that over here at the top problem. All right, finally the grand finale. Nope, that's a lie. Well, kind of. It's all chapter number 8, I suppose. So this number 8 is like the grand finale of all the things we did. And from what I'm doing right now, this is much longer than what a reasonable quiz is. So I'm going to make sure that our quiz is actually shorter than this because I'm pretty good at math and this is taking me quite a while. And so I want to make sure that it's not too much. So if you can do this, this is going to be harder and longer than our regular quiz. All right, so your job apparently is to find all the zeros. Okay, so I really love to have that whole chart of factors and zeros. So I made it on here permanently for you. My equation is this, and I'm given that this is a factor, so I put it in my factor chart. Now, this has a degree of 3. Since it has a degree of 3, that means I'm going to get 3 zeros, 3 factors. I only have 1. So if x plus 2 is a factor, then I know that negative 2 would be a 0, and there isn't any multiplicity because it doesn't have a power. It's not a repeated factor. Thankfully, x plus 2 is plain, and I can use synthetic division to help me find the other factors and zeros. Being careful because this gave me a factor, I actually have to put the 0 in the box. So the negative 2 goes here. Now I'm going to watch this for missing powers of x. I have 1x cubed, negative 1x squared, negative 10 x's, and then negative 8. So no missing powers of x. So that's kind of nice. So I'm going to go ahead and do my synthetic division. drop the 1, do this little multiplying shenanigans. Look here, that's going to be a minus 3. Multiply those, that's going to give me a 6. Now, I was told that this is a factor, which means that negative 2 is a 0, which means I better not get a remainder or I did something wrong. Combining these, I get negative 4. So then thankfully, these make an 8 and I get 0 as my remainder. That is a good sign. That also means that since this was x to the third, this is an x to the second. So I currently have x squared minus 3x minus 4 based on these results. But I need to factor that. So think about what that would split into. To make 4 in a way that subtracts to be 3, I need to use a 4 and a 1. To get a negative 3 out of that, I'll need a minus 4 and a positive 1. So I've done my other factors now. X plus 1 is a factor. X minus 4 is a factor. The 0 that would go with this one is a negative 1. And the 0 that would go with this one is a positive 4. Because that would create, if I put a negative 1 in here, that would make it 0. If I put a positive 4 in here, that would make it 0. Neither one of these has a power or a repeating, like it's not listed twice, so there's no multiplicity, which means all of these are just going to cross plain Jane at that spot. I'm expecting with a degree of 3, I'm expecting 2 turns because it's the degree minus 1. Okay, so then, of course, I'm going to sketch my graph using my key elements, which are these guys, and end behavior. So let's look first at our zeros. I have one at negative 1, negative 2, and positive 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, all of them are just going to cross over. Looking at this first term, my first term's an x cubed. This is odd, so opposite. This is positive, so right end up. But if they're opposite, then left end's going down. So this is going to go up, left end's going to go down, and it's just going to cross through here, cross through here, cross through here. I don't know where it goes there and exactly where it goes there, but I do know that it crosses through here and goes up. I know it crosses through here and comes down. I know it crosses through here. Everything else is just kind of me thinking, well, it's got to go back down in here. I mean, maybe it comes way down here. I don't know. So you would never be judged on that. We're looking for this key point, this key point, this key point, proper end behavior, and then crossing when it should, squiggle when it, snake when it should, and bounce when it should. So that, my friends, is everything on the quiz. And like I said, as I'm making this video, which is feeling super long to me, it's making me realize that I need to shorten the quiz. And so I will do that, but these elements will still be on there. Probably just not as many questions. I figured 8 was not too many, but it is definitely taking a while, and I know what I'm doing. So I'll shorten it up a tad. But everything that's on here you want to know and understand. So if there's any parts you need to watch again or practice some more, go ahead and do that. Have a great day.